Sam, welcome to the podcast. So good to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to
Yes,
be here.
so excited. We have so much to delve into. You're certainly a busy woman. To those listening, I have Sam Squiers here with me, who is an ambassador for the Miracle Babies Foundation, which is Australia's leading organisation supporting premature and sick newborns, their families, and the hospitals that care for them. Sam is also an award-winning sports presenter and journalist for Fox Sports News. She's a fierce advocate for women's sports and featured prominently in the Matildas doco on Disney, which is amazing. Honestly, great work, girl. She was also a FIFA Women's World Cup Beyond Greatness champion ambassador and is the founder of Sportet. Am I saying it right, Sam? Is that the
Yes,
right
yes,
pronunciation? Good.
perfect.
Which is a business that began as a platform to tell the stories of women in sport and quickly grew to consult with major sporting organisations on how to improve their women's games and with businesses on how they can better support women in sport. So, again, another amazing initiative. Sam and her husband Ben are parents to Imogen and Al. And is it Al or Ali? I'll check that
It's
with you too.
yeah,
Oh, good,
yeah, yeah.
good. Immi was born at 32 weeks after suffering from severe pre-eclampsia, while Al was born with a cleft lip and palate. Sam has recently become an ambassador for Interplast,
Mhm.
which performs surgeries on cleft children in developing countries. Again, another amazing initiative. Sam's also written a children's book, Princesses Wear Sneakers, and has another book on the way in 2024. My goodness, I don't even know where to start with all of that, but you are obviously doing such great work in the world. And tell us, Sam, where did the passion for women's sports stem from for you?
Really organically, really. I think I was just a little kid who was always into sport. I was always passionate about it. I always played it, played every sport possible, played rep sport in multiple sports. Just lived and breathed it and always wanted to become a journalist. And I think I found it really strange when I did finally crack into journalism and the media that women's sports wasn't taken seriously. And I'd constantly be told things like, well, women don't like sport and, women don't play sport. And it just never made sense to me because I was a woman and I was always passionate about sport. I knew that in AFL clubs, around 50% were women. I'd go out to the games at NRL games and I'd see women there. And I was really close growing up with my grandmother, and she is a mad sportswoman. She was, in her 90s, and she just loved her AFL. She loved her tennis. She loved her golf. She would watch all of them on TV, and she was very prim and proper, and she'd be at a ladies' lunch, and she would have no qualms asking them to put the football on in the background, not the sound, just so I can keep an eye on the score. So it just never made sense to me. I'm like, where on earth is this coming? I'd be at the cafe and I always read the paper when we read papers, those, when they were actually in that hard form in front of us. But, I'd open up from the back to the front. And I remember being in a cafe and a man, pointing that out to me and just going, oh, you never see a woman like, opening up, and reading the back from back to front. And I just kept thinking, where is this coming from? Of course, women love sport. Of course, women play sport. And just always had this really organic passion to, get to the bottom of this and to change that landscape for the next generation because I knew it was false and I didn't know where it was driving from. And I think if you ask anyone, ever since I was in regional sport days as like a junior reporter, regional TV days as a junior reporter, I was always up on my little soapbox every day talking about women's sports. I used to, try to get women's sports stories up as much as possible. And would have to like sneak around and lie. I remember telling my boss that I was going to do this story on a rugby player, but didn't tell him it was a female player. And then doing the whole story on this female rugby player, but I just didn't. By the time I'd shot it and everything, he was like, "Oh, we're going to have to run it now."
Oh
Um,
gosh.
and and even like I knew in the middle of the week in regional TV was when they had like a lull in stories. So or I'd wait till like the sports editor or my chief of staff was away, and then I'd pitch all these women's sports stories and go out and do them. So I used to have to sneak around and do as much as I can. And those were the early days, and that just carried through when I got into Metro Media. And when I worked at Sky and worked at Nine, used to always, as much as I could, try to get women's sports stories up because I had this access to this mainstream media platform. So I just tried my best because I couldn't understand why no one was seeing what I would see. I remember a boss of mine said to me at Nine, he was like, "So you honestly think one day, Sam, we will be watching women play rugby league on the TV, just like we do with the men in the NRL?" And he was saying it like I was crazy. And I remember looking at him just going, "Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do actually." And him just being thinking I was crazy, but I thought he was crazy because he couldn't see, what I saw. And then, fast forward now to 2023 and, women are playing sport in the AFL, for their own competition in the NRL, like the Matildas, where do we even start? Like, such an event that galvanized the whole of Australia like we've never, ever experienced before. And that was women doing that and women in sport. So, 2023 for me, I think from fighting for so long, being called and treated like I was crazy woman for so long, for seeing something that other people couldn't see, it was such a validating year for me because I've had people all this year calling me up just going, "Oh, you were onto it. Like you knew." And I was like, but it didn't come from anywhere other than the fact that I love sport. The people around me were women and loved sport. And I just couldn't understand why women wouldn't play competitive sport, why we wouldn't have our own competition. So yeah, and Sportet started, way back when I was working at Sky, and then when I moved on to Channel 9, I was also writing articles on the side, and I opinion pieces about women in sport or stories about female athletes. And I really struggled. I had access to these mainstream media platforms, but I really struggled to get these women's sports stories on these mainstream media platforms. So I started my own platform called Sportet, and just so I had a platform to tell these stories. And, I started posting on their opinion pieces about women's sports issues, profiles, anything. And then, they just really grew, and then had businesses and sports organizations contacting me saying, "Okay, we need your point of view. We want to be able to do this for female athletes. What do you think of this idea? And can you come on board and do this?" So, it was a really good. And then, the whole landscape has changed so much now that, I have access again to mainstream media platform, but I don't have problems getting women's sports stories on at all. Like that's, it's so easy to do now. I don't have to fight. I don't have to convince anyone. I can just walk in and say, I've got this great story. It's about this female athlete, and boom, they don't think anything different of it being female. So I know that seems so normal now, but it wasn't normal for the majority of my career in sports media, and it's so lovely now. So Sportets, it's a very different looking business to what it used to, which is a good thing because, it started off being that platform, but now mainstream media is able to tell the stories. Don't get me wrong, we still have a long way to go. We're not telling enough as it is, and we're not, prioritizing them like they should be, but we'll get there slowly but surely. But it's been a very validating 2023.
You've been such a pioneer in this space. And I think like you'll be one of those people where you look back on your life and you're like, wow, like she made a difference. She made such an impact in such a huge industry like the sporting industry. And like to have that level of satisfaction, to have seen it go from where you saw it to sort of where it is today. I mean, you should be incredibly proud
It just
of the
makes
impact
me
that
like,
you've made, and
well,
culturally
thank
too.
you. There's been
Yeah.
so many people that have made that impact. If I could just play a little
Yeah.
bit of a part in being able to change that landscape. But I remember
Yeah.
when Imogen was born, I wrote this article basically talking about, welcome to the wide world of women in sport, and everything I wanted her, the world of sport that I wanted her to grow up in. And it was really like this year, I looked back on that story and I put it up on my Instagram. because it was, I didn't think I would see so much change so soon.
Mm,
But everything I said about the world that I wanted her to grow up, like I wanted her to think it was strange that I started sport ed. I wanted her to think of the
mm,
olden days when people thought it was strange if you were reading a paper back to front, because the
mm.
landscape had changed so much that, she's like, well, I don't understand why they thought women didn't like sport.
Mm.
Like, how could that ever be a thing?
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
wanted her to grow up in that world, and it was so lovely because now she is, especially with the Matildas. And it's so funny because I
Mm.
even mentioned some of the names of the Matildas, who I've known for a really long time and done stories
Mm.
on for a really long time. And
Mm.
when she was born, I named those Matildas, Tamika Yallop and Katrina Gorry and Sam Kerr. And it was so nice because, 6 years later, they were still in that setup, and they've
Mm.
been in it for over 10 years. They're still in that setup, and they were part of this golden generation of Matildas who were changing
Mm.
the way we saw women's sports completely in this country.
Mm.
So yeah, it was nice reflecting on that article. Like, and even I
Mm.
find it difficult to think that that's what it was like, even 5 years ago. So much has
Yeah.
changed, but there's been a long people throughout the history of sport who have
Mm.
pushed so hard for a long time to see the kind of change that we finally saw,
Yeah.
or
It's amazing.
this year, but have been seeing for the last few years.
Yeah, that cultural shift. It's amazing when we look at the second, like the generation, of our children's age to your point, and it's amazing to think about, yeah, how the world will be so different for them, hopefully, from all of the change that we've made now. And I'd love to delve. Let's talk about your parenting experience because,
Mm-hmm.
I for both children, funnily enough, both girls. So it's quite interesting again that you're such an advocate for women in sport, and I'm sure,
Mm.
yeah, they'll very much look up to the work that you're doing out there. But, what was your conceiving journey like the first time around? Did you always know you wanted to be a parent? Talk us through it.
Yeah, I think like I was never one of those people that my whole purpose in life is to be a mum, which is so funny now because there's nothing that I love more than being a mum, and especially to my two little girls. Like, no job. If I'd known what it was like to be a mum, I probably would have been my sole purpose, but I didn't grow up like that. And I was married to my husband for 5 years before we even started thinking about having kids. And I think we were talking about it last night, Ben and I. We are just having a really good time. Like when we were like married, we just hit this really sweet spot where work was really great, life was really great. We were just really enjoying life a lot. We went on this epic trip just before Immi was born in 2016, and just had the time of our lives. Like one of those trips overseas where just everything fell into place and it was just the best. And, I think someone said to us, oh, last trip before you have kids, but we didn't think that. We're like, no, 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 we'll probably fit in a few more. But we kind of got back and we were like, oh, I think we both were like, I think we're ready now. Like, I think we're at a good spot where with work, it's great. Life is great and our relationship is great that we can, let's do this. But yeah, we're definitely enjoying the life before. And I think everyone's like that. Those couple of years right before you have a kid, with your
Yes.
partner or your husband, like we were just, in that really great sweet spot. It's always a lot of fun. Um,
Mm.
and then yeah, we were really lucky with conceiving. We did have one miscarriage early on at the start, and I think that's when I really knew I wanted to become a mum because it was such an early miscarriage, but like I miscarried when I was at work and I didn't live that far.
Mm.
And I came home and I just remember feeling utterly devastated for like weeks afterwards. And I was like, how is it so early on? And this is, yeah, really devastating me. And I think that's when I really knew, oh my gosh, more than anything in this world, this is, yeah, what I want for us and for
Mm.
me. So yeah, but we were really lucky. Like we conceived really, really easily. And I know that's something that, I shouldn't say or not feel so comfortable to say. But when you hear the rest of our story, it's okay for me to say that.
Mm.
But yeah, conceiving both times with the girls was really quick and really easy, but it was very clear early on that, our pregnancy wasn't normal and going to
Mm.
plan at all, which it took Ben and I a long time to get our heads around. We were super fit at that stage. Like before I conceived Immi, I'd like just run 2 marathons in 10 months. We were super healthy, super fit. Ben, is super fit as well and does Ironmans. And I guess health had never been a problem for us. It's something that we really valued. So we had done everything right. We never smoked and drank in moderation, like never done drugs. We're like, why? Something going wrong. So we knew early on that Immi wasn't at the growth that she was meant to be. Then we found out my placenta hadn't really formed properly and wasn't operating properly, so the nutrients weren't getting to her. So she had, restricted growth. But we thought it was just going to get better because the whole time they never want to stress you out. So they always tell you stuff so positively. We just thought, yeah, it was going to be okay. And then I think it was at 26 weeks, they took us into like the bad news room and after one of our scans and sat us down and basically said, like, your placenta isn't operating properly. She's not growing at the rate that she should be. Basically she could come in 2 weeks, she could come in 4 weeks, but it's 50-50 whether you're even going to get 6 weeks down the track from here. And Ben and I went for a walk after that, and I was like, did you just think everything was okay? And he was like, I just thought they were just being cautious this whole time. I was like, I don't think everything is going to be okay. So I had to cut down work to 3 days a week, which for me, it doesn't sound much, but it was for me at the time, like work was everything. I loved it. I was working at Channel 9 in Brisbane. Sportette was going really strongly. We were doing this Sportette summit for women in sport and business. I was halfway through planning that. But I had to cut it all back. We were at the hospital for scans and meeting specialists 5 days a week. It was pretty full on. And her growth was just getting like slowing down completely. So we did think, because we were so heavily monitored, we thought it would be a case of she would stop growing. We would then, go in, take her out. We knew we'd probably end up with a premature baby. We just didn't know how premature she was going to be. And then one night something happened that no one really expected. Ben was in Wollongong because he was working in Wollongong at the time, and I just started getting really severe pains, like stabbing pains, and I was home alone and I didn't know what to do. And it's your first child, so you don't know. Your body is completely changing. Everything is so different. I had no idea what was normal third trimester pains and what wasn't. I had these similar pains 2 weeks beforehand, and I was at work and I emailed my obstetrician. I was like, Megan Kastner, Brisbane's best obstetrician ever. And I was like, I'm just getting these stabbing pains. I'm sure they're probably normal third trimester pains. And she called me at work straight away, and she was like, first of all, never email me, always call me, Sam. She's like, second of all, you need to go to hospital now. And I was like, I'm kind of at work. And she was like, you have to leave now. So I left work and went to hospital, and they could see when these pains were coming, but my cervix was closed. Anyway, they ended up putting me on bed rest at home. I didn't. I went to work, but I promised them I'd sit down to read the news. And then just carried on. And then they went away. So when these happened again, I thought, they'll just go away like they did 2 weeks ago. And then they just kept getting worse at like 2:00 in the morning. And I ended up calling the hospital because then I was sitting down. I was like, actually, I can't feel her move. I couldn't feel Immi move anymore. So I tried everything to get her to move that they tell you to. And then I rang the hospital and they said, you need to get in straight away. So I called Ben at 2:00 in the morning, who was in New South Wales at the time, interstate. And I said, I'm just, going to go to hospital. And I was so calm about it because we were always in hospital at that stage. We were always having scans and checks. I said, it's probably nothing. And he was like, well, how are you going to get there? And I said, and I didn't think I could drive because these pains. And I was like, he's like, you need to call an ambulance. I was like, that's way too dramatic. I'll just call an Uber. So I called an Uber, and I remember grabbing my keys and my wallet. And I remember looking at my sunglasses going, I'm going to be back before the sun gets up. Won't need my sunglasses. So probably a bit naive, which is probably good in a way because it kept me quite calm. And my poor Uber driver, when I waddled down with his pregnant belly at like 2:00 in the morning, and he just looked at me, he was like, are you in labor? And I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what that is, but just get to me to the hospital. So he got me to hospital, and it was then that we realized that things were actually pretty bad. And and Megan was there straight away, and my obstetrician, and she was like, "Where's Ben?" I'm like, "He's in Wollongong." She was like, "Oh, I'm afraid you were going to say that." She goes, "Can we get him back?" And I was like, so we were calling Ben, trying to get him back.
Mm.
Um, but it was 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, you can't get back quickly from Wollongong to Brisbane.
No. Yeah.
So yeah, and then everything just started shutting down. And what had happened is I had a placental abruption. So my placenta had broken away from my uterus. I was bleeding from inside my uterus. Immi was in quite a bit of distress. And then I had severe pre-eclampsia, which and it was really sudden and really severe. So like while I was lying there, like all my vision went blurry because all the fluid was pulling on my brain. And that's when they realized we need to get her out ASAP. So they called Ben, and they're like, "We can't wait. We're just going to have to get her out now." So, and Ben had he was at the fire station because he's a fire, and he'd booked like the first flight. He just got on the internet and just booked the first flight out and started making his way to Sydney to get that 6 o'clock flight. And yeah, and then I just had to get wheeled to do an emergency cesarean, and then they just had to take her out straight away. So she went to NICU. I went straight to ICU because I didn't understand at the time that I was not in a good way as well. So preeclampsia was starting to shut down my organs and everything. So I went to ICU for 3 days, and then Immi was in NICU for the next almost 8 weeks in the end. So yeah, and then that began our epic NICU journey, which, because she was only 1.3 kilos. She was 32 weeks, but 1.3 kilos, and didn't have enough time to get the steroids into her, which gives that last little boost for the lungs support. So she had like chronic lung disease. She was on oxygen for the first 5 months. She came home on home oxygen. But yeah, she's a little battler and just battled through those weeks in NICU,
That
which,
is,
some women are there for some families, I
yeah,
should say,
yeah.
they're there for 3 months, some 4 months, so,
Wow.
but yeah, they were like the longest weeks, and we just yearned to be able to take a little girl home and have like a
Yeah.
normal parenting experience. But in a way, it was our first pregnancy. It was good that it was the first one because we didn't know what it felt like to hold your baby straight after giving birth. I didn't see her for 3 days. Ben saw her before I did, but didn't hold her before I did. And yeah, and the moment I finally got wheeled in, they wheeled me in from ICU to the day before I left ICU to go see her, because that was their priority. They were like, "We need to get you to see her. We need to get you
Yeah.
together. So as soon as you're well enough, we'll wheel you in." So they wheeled my bed into the NICU and at the Mater Mothers in Brisbane, and it was a great hospital. And lucky that I was in ICU. I wasn't separated from Immi. She was in the same hospital, and then I got to hold this little tiny little thing with all these. We were like, both of us just had all these tubes and cords attached to us, but she's just this tiny little fragile thing with this big face mask on, and yeah, but she was beautiful. It was the most
Did
amazing
you
experience.
that like I feel like so that like what a journey firstly, and
Mm,
just on that, I mean it's so many questions, but just as you were talking then I literally got goosebumps when you said, when I finally got to meet her after,
mm,
those 3 days in ICU for yourself. So did
mm.
you know once you'd given birth, you had a C-section, were you aware of what was going on? Were you aware they were taking the baby away, that you had to be wheeled off out? Were you just out of it? What was it
Oh,
like?
I think I remember saying to myself, um, if Ben can't be here, like
Mm,
I don't want to be here. So it was probably like a good um, mechanism in the end, because I was like, well, if we can't enjoy this moment, because you always
yeah.
talk about the moment you give birth is meant to be like the greatest moment ever. And I was like, well, this isn't, Ben's not here. I'm all alone.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be that moment. And my OB, my obstetrician, Megan Kastner, like the best thing she could have said to me, like it still makes me so emotional thinking about it. She said to me that moment, she said, "Sam, this isn't your moment." She said, "This isn't your moment." And she was right by my bed. She's like, "I promise you, you're going to get your moment. Your moment doesn't have to be this one. You're going to get your moment when Ben's going to be here And that's going to be your moment. It was the best thing she probably could have said to me, because it didn't matter that everyone says that moment when you see her for the first time. I kind of, and she said to me when, they took her out, she said, Sam, have a quick look, but I couldn't raise my head. And I also was like, I was choking on my vomit because I ended up being allergic to some of the, which we need on Danzatron, everyone knows it, that anti-nausea drug. I ended up being allergic to it. So they gave me that drug and I just kept vomiting, but you can't move. So you choke on your vomit. It's super lovely.
Oh,
Um, but I remember just seeing her being taken away. Um, but I remember just thinking that's not our moment. And when they wheeled me in, and Ben was by my side to see her for the first time. Like that was our moment. That was the moment that, I really got to see Immi for the first time and have that beautiful moment. Didn't have to be, that moment when she was born, because she was in distress as well. So I couldn't touch her, anything. There was no time for that. Like I didn't hear anything. I don't even know she was breathing at that moment. She was intubated to start with, so probably not. And then she had her own little journey at that moment as well. So, yeah, but I think, I think it was good in a way that I'd tapped out mentally.
yeah.
And I don't think I did. I remember them taking me to ICU and they're like, we'll take you to ICU. I'm like, why am I going to ICU? I shouldn't be going to ICU. Um, and then, and even one of the nurses in ICU, because I was like, can I go on the ward now? Like, I need to go on the ward. And she was like, I don't think you understand how sick you are. I'm like, no, I don't. So I just didn't want to be here at
Yeah,
all. I
yeah,
just wanted to be on the ward with my baby. Um, so
yes.
yeah, but she was like, I don't think you understand. And I thought I'd just be there for, one day. And then they were like overnight. And then the next night I was like, can I go home? Like, or just go somewhere. But yeah, and then, suddenly I'm like, I had like my obstetrician, then I had like a neurologist, I had a renal specialist, I had a cardiologist. All these people are coming in asking me all these questions. Um, and I remember thinking, like, there's a car crash victim right next to me. Like, he needs ICU. I was like, I just had a baby. Like, that's
Yeah.
all. I had no concept that my situation could have been as dangerous as it was. And Ben, I think when Ben came, because he got that first flight back to Sydney, so he arrived and went straight to the hospital and found ICU. And he asked Megan all the questions, I hadn't asked because I was still a little bit in shock. Um, and he was like, well, if she hadn't gone to the hospital when she did, if she had waited till the morning,
Yeah.
what would have happened? And she was like, yeah, they both wouldn't be here. So we were like, oh,
Wow.
okay.
It
So I'm
was
kind of
that
glad that,
serious.
yeah. So, which then I started to think, I was like, okay, this is, a lot.
Yeah, a
Yeah, it
lot.
took me ages to process the whole
Yeah.
thing. Like, because you go from your situation, then suddenly you've got a baby in NICU. So
Yeah.
you're like straight into, you don't even worry about you're straight. And I hated when people ask me about me. I'm like, I'm fine. And then I'd go there. So it was probably like not until Amy turned 1 that I started to get a bit of PTSD and trying to go through everything. And then I realized, like, I probably need to see someone about what happened. I haven't really processed all of this. So I saw, and a couple of preemie mums I saw were also seeing a psychologist to process what had happened. And it was the best thing I could have done. I probably should have done it sooner, but I didn't have time, because you just go straight into like you're a NICU mum, you're a preemie
Yep.
mum. You just need to,
Survival, right?
and concentrate on your
Yeah.
baby, not on you.
Yes.
And I was just getting frustrated that I couldn't walk, that I was in ICU. Like I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible and pretend that everything was okay. And it took me a while to realize that it's not, and it's not
Yeah.
okay. And also, like, a preemie progression, every preemie is different. Like, people, once you say you have a preemie baby, people love to tell you about a friend of a friend who had a preemie and everything was okay. But every preemie is different. Like, even our neighbours here their son was born 32 weeks, but he was born like bigger than an owl, and they were out in 2 weeks, and ours was 1.3 kilos,
Yeah.
and our little girl, and she was in there and in and out of hospital for, a number of months.
At what point did you start feeling physically better? So, we did 3 days in ICU. What
Yeah.
happened after that for you and your physical health?
Yeah, so and then I went to the ward and I was on the ward for quite a while.
Okay.
I that's the thing I used to always say as well. Like
Mm,
my body crashed really quickly, but it
mm,
recovered really quickly, and I put that down. We had such I was so fit, and we did
mm,
have such a healthy lifestyle.
mm,
It took quite a while for my vision to come back. I would still have
mm,
like for weeks and weeks afterwards, like my there was just a line in my vision. It was like you're
mm,
watching TV and there's like an annoying reception where it's like this
mm,
wavy, fuzzy line through your eyesight, and that took quite a while to come back. But yeah, I recovered. I recovered really, really well, which was good. And I probably don't give my body enough. I, I credit for bouncing back the way it did. So, and
mm,
also it is that moment that you're like, you just focus just on the next thing. I think it was more psychologically, like
mm,
you took me a while because you're just in the thick of it.
mm,
And then you're doing all your therapies with your premi as soon as they're out of the hospital because premi journey doesn't end when you're out of hospital. Like if
mm,
you have a friend who's had a premi, there's all the therapies and physio and everything else that you have to go through. For us, it was sleep studies for her oxygen to see if she could finally, her lungs were strong enough to get off oxygen.
mhm.
And yeah, so there's a lot going on, but that was the thing that also got me was like, okay, it doesn't end as soon as you're out of
As
hospital.
soon
Like,
as you leave. Because how
yeah, I thought
long,
that was
you
it.
said, how long in the hospital was it before you were able to leave?
Yeah, probably about 7.5 weeks, and then we left, and then we were like the next week we were straight back in the hospital for another
Oh,
sleep study for her oxygen to see, about her oxygen and a couple of other drugs that she was on, whether she could
mm,
handle those and
mm.
doing those studies. So, yeah, but as I said, like there are so many preemie mums are in there for like 3 or 4 months as well. Like it was, yeah, an epic kind of yeah, and it's just like the yeah, the toughest journey I think Ben and I have been on.
I cannot even imagine. So for those 7 weeks, was there a period of time in which finally you were sort of going back home to and from hospital and things
Yeah,
like that? What did
yeah,
it look like?
yeah. So our routine was we were first we just wake up in the morning and then we'd
Mm,
just go straight to the hospital. We'd try to
mm,
get there like at before 8, and then we'd sit there all day. Sometimes we'd be able to hold her if she was well enough. Sometimes we couldn't, but very rarely. Like you always try to have a cuddle. So we would just one of us would have her on our chest and give her that kangaroo cuddle or skin to skin contact, and then
mhm,
that was our day, just literally lying there with her. We'd go home because we were really lucky in Brisbane. We lived quite close to the hospital. It
mhm,
was only about 15 minutes away, so we'd go home for lunch, have lunch, then we'd go back in the afternoon for an hour, like hour lunch, and then we'd go back, and then again one of us would have a cuddle, or we'd just sit there by her her humidity crib and just look at our baby until like 8, 9 o'clock at night. Then we'd go home. In the early days, it was longer. As she got
mm,
better, and we would do things like if we got to change her nappy for the day, like that was like the most glorious moment of our day
mm,
because that was the only thing that made us feel like a parent that day. The only thing we could do for her as a parent, other than you can't even really touch them. Like you can't stroke them. You can only like put your hand on them, but not for too long. Um, so yeah, if we could change her nappy, and I'd never changed a nappy before, and the first nappy I
mm,
changed ever was this tiny little 1.3 kilogram thing with cords going everywhere and in through like the humidity crib as well. So you're in through just little pockets in the little humidity crib and
mm.
changing this nappy, which yeah, that's pretty complicated nappy to change, which are all too big for them because they're so tiny.
Mm.
So, but yeah, that was the only thing that made us feel like a parent that day. And then onward, like we could, because I was just expressing all the time. So I just sit there,
Mm.
look at my baby, express milk
Yeah.
to feed her.
Mm.
And yeah, so when we started, when she was in NICU and starting to breastfeed or in special care, I
Mm.
think it was at special care we started it. when she got promoted to special care, we'd start to do little breastfeeds, but it took a lot of energy for them to suck, and they need all the energy they can to grow. So you couldn't
Okay.
do too much of that, and then you just put it back in. So yeah, our days were around her nappy changes. We'd be so upset if we get there a little late in the morning and a nurse who didn't know us had changed a nappy. We'd be like, no, that's our job. Like,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
so yeah, we never complained about a nappy change. I think for the
Mm.
whole two pregnancies, because two of our girls, because we just knew how special doing that was, and we weren't going to take something as simple as changing a nappy for granted.
It's amazing, like puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? Like
Mm.
you hear something like that and you're like, wow, like yeah, those smelly nappies, where
Yeah,
the rest of us are usually
never
like,
complained
oh,
about
you
it.
can do it. Now I'm
Yeah,
like, wow, like you're right. I mean, what a
never
gift.
complained
It's a
about it.
healthy child that's able to,
Yeah,
to use the nappy, etc. So where was, because I'm just listening to that and I'm just like that is such a minefield of emotions, of everything, of I'm sure you felt elements, you're exhausted, you would be
exhaustion.
frustrated, you want to be
Mm.
home with your baby, you want to cuddle your baby, you can't. Was
We just
there
want to pick up
elements?
our baby. We had to ask for
Right?
permission to pick up your
Yes,
baby. Like that
yes,
seems
like the
so
basic thing, right? The
basic.
human,
I see other people
normal,
have, we had
yeah,
friends that had babies at the same time and they could just
mm,
pick up their baby. And I'm like, I have to
yeah,
ask for permission to pick up my baby,
right?
like with good
Yeah,
reason, but it's a different experience
it's a
to do that.
very different experience.
Mm.
I'm sure, like, was there complicated emotions like guilt and other things in there? Like, where was your head at during that time?
Oh, I think during that time I was just so focused on Emmy.
Mm,
Um, it wasn't until Elle was born that I really like. You do get a lot of mum guilt with being a preemie mum, like because it's your body that has to build her and develop her and grow her. And I always felt like I didn't do my job properly by not getting her to full term. And I've had to readjust the way I think about my body, because I loved my body. Like I can push my body so hard. It ran marathons. It like stayed up late and did sport ed. It like, when my brain didn't want to work and I was live on air, I could make my brain work. I'd do deals with it. I'm like, just keep going. I know you're tired. Really pushed it. And I felt like I had this good relationship with my body. And then I'm like, but all I wanted you to do was grow my baby. And I felt like you didn't do it. And I had to change the way I thought about my body for a long time, going, well, hang on, like maybe my body did do a good job. Maybe, if my body had been slack, then the outcome would have been a lot worse. Amy wouldn't have survived, or I wouldn't have survived, or something like that. So I had to change. It took me a long time to think about that.
mm,
I always felt like my body failed me when I really probably wanted it to do its job the best in that moment. I don't care about anything else you've ever done for me, body. Just get my
mm.
girls through their pregnancies. So yeah, you do struggle with that, thinking that that's your job. What did I do? How did I do that? Did I fail? At the first turn of being a mum by not getting you full term. So, and then when Elle's pregnancy, being having a cleft lip and cleft palate again, I felt that I was already dealing with guilt, and then I just felt that guilt tenfold at that point, thinking, both my girls now, I haven't done my job as a mom, like to grow them. And I remember thinking with Emmy and especially with Elle as well, just going, okay, well, if, I didn't do, and it's such unhealthy language, and it was real, but I know a lot of women out there would probably relate to that language where I was like, well, if I didn't do my job while you were in me, I remember just saying to Emmy in the humidity crib, like, I promise, like, I'm going to be the world's best mum when you get out of here. Like, I'll do my job like the best you've ever experienced. I'll be the best mum for both you girls. So yeah, I remember making that promise to them when they were little. Like, I'm sorry that you've had a rough start in life and you've had to be really strong, but and I'm sorry that you're not just sucking on a boob and pooping and sleeping. You're going through a whole lot other challenges, but I promise I'll make up to you when we're on the other side.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to hear. The clef palette. So could you talk to us a little bit about
Mm.
that? And more so, also, at what point did you realize that that was going to eventuate? Like, what was the story? Yeah, around that.
Yeah, it was really weird because it took me a while to be brave enough to go again with the pregnancy, but I really wanted to have another child.
Yeah.
And again, we got into the position where we thought we'd move back to New South Wales to be closer to family, and I thought we're in a position now where we can do that. And yeah, so we fell pregnant, and it was the first 20, because it was a 20-week scan that I knew something wasn't, going to plan with Immi. So I was really like anxious for those first 20 weeks, building up. And I remember the first scan I went for at 8 weeks, like I just burst into tears, like I was getting triggers all over the place. And then, yeah, the 20-week scan was really, I cried in the morning, like I was terrified. And I remember like they were doing all the measurements and they were like, yep, this is good. Everything's looking great. Yep, placenta's working, all good. The Doppler, bloody Doppler. Anyway, and they were like, oh, okay, you can go empty your bladder in the toilet. And then we're done. I was like, oh, good. So went and, go to the toilet. And then I came back in. I remember being on the toilet going, it's okay. Like, I didn't have to be scared. Like, it's okay. Everything's okay. Like, she's a great size. Everything's like normal. It's fine. And then I came out of the toilet and she was like, I just want to get one more image of the face before you go. And then that was when she was like, oh, I think your daughter has a cleft. And, I knew what clefts were, but I don't think Ben knew what clefts were. But she wouldn't tell us like the severity. You don't know until they're born if it's also cleft lip and cleft palate, because the palate's really hard to see. And then, yeah, it was just a whirlwind then. Like, I think we just really wanted, after having so many trips to the hospital and so many specialists, we just wanted a pregnancy where we didn't have specialists or hospital trips. And then suddenly they were like, right, you've got to see the professor of fetal medicine at Randwick. And then we had to meet with the cleft team at Randwick, and who are amazing, like absolutely amazing. And they just prepare you so well for what's ahead. But yeah, pretty soon we realized our hopes of just having a straightforward pregnancy or, baby were not going to be the case. And yeah, and then they tell you at Sydney Kids, are like, oh, you're with us for the next 20 years. Because in a way we thought, oh, maybe it's just the first few surgeries and then you're done. But it is an ongoing process. Like Els had 3 surgeries in 3 years, and she's still got a few more to go. But you don't know how many they have because every baby develops differently. But yeah, we had to let go of those hopes of having, something with, like, I've had friends that, they only have like 3 scans their whole pregnancy. I'm like, what's that like? And I remember being in one of the scans and seeing a girl, they're so excited because they're getting a scan to see, what their baby, they'll get a photo of their baby. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, I just wish how nice that would be that your only concern going in for a scan is, well, not even a concern. Your only thought is that, oh, cool, we'll get like a picture of our baby today and we'll get to see our baby. Whereas it was such a different process for us. We held on to so much. And I think as well, like from that NICU experience, it wasn't just our experience. It was being around so many babies. I remember Ben saying to me, he's like, I had no idea that so many things could happen to babies. Like, you hear of the really straightforward pregnancies, and then you're in NICU and every baby in there has a different story, a different complication, a different challenge. And you just don't even think that all that could happen when you're pregnant. But so for us, it was, people think how unlucky people are, like when things go not according to plan, but we had this big appreciation. We're like, well, for things to go perfectly to plan, like that is rare in itself. So we had that kind of mentality. But yeah, I think I was really, Elle's pregnancy I found really difficult. But because, I had that feeling of guilt that I hadn't done the job properly, but, and also so many complications, and you don't know till she's born. Like and then when they cleft, they're like, oh, this can be linked to like 40 different syndromes, and you're like, well, what are these syndromes? They're like, well, there's up to like 40 of them, and then they're like, can you tell me? And I'm like, well, no, we won't know till she's born. So you're kind of holding on to a lot in that sense. But then the moment she was born and the moment she came out of me and they put her on my chest was the most healing moment and the most beautiful moment, when I just knew everything was going to be okay because she was here. Like she arrived safely. She was beautiful. Like, and I just knew I was going to protect her for the rest of my life. And I knew I was just going to give her the greatest life. But yeah, with all the concerns in the pregnancy, finding it so challenging, that I still can feel it, that fierce feeling when they, she's finally here and they lift her up and then they put her on my chest. And yeah, it was just the most beautiful healing moment for me, that I knew everything was going to be okay.
Yeah, I feel like often the anticipation of it all and the
Mm,
uncertainty and the risks that are being told to you and all of that, when you can do nothing about it other than continue to grow this beautiful human, it makes sense that
yeah.
finally when you can see this beautiful human. And did you did Elle go to full term, or what was her?
Yeah, um, she got to 37 weeks. So
Okay.
we're
Yeah.
at 36, and yeah, I
Mm,
remember going, because she was born March 2020, where we all know what happened in March 2020 as
mm,
well. My obstetrician in Wollongong, because I
mm,
couldn't have Megan. We actually went back to Brisbane to see Megan when we were thinking about
mm.
having a baby because we loved her so much.
Yeah.
Megan Kastner, if you're in Brisbane, she's the best OB. And we went and saw her, and then yeah, my OB in Wollongong, she went for a conference in the US like at the end of February, and then
Okay.
she got locked out of the country, and so
Oh.
she was yeah, so we were phoning them going, what's going to happen? We knew I couldn't go to
Mm,
full term because of Immy's cesarean, and what
okay.
happened with Immi.
Mm,
So we knew we'd have to take her out early,
mm,
and then everything was shutting down. Like, people were wearing masks, all of that.
mm.
And I went into hospital, and my blood pressure just like spiked. And Ben and I were sitting there, and Ben goes, "We're not getting out of here today, are we?" And I was like, "I don't know." So
Yeah.
yeah, they kept, but they gave us the steroid shots to help Elle's lungs just develop a
Mm,
little bit more before they took her out. And then, yeah,
okay.
we had a great obstetrician, Pip Gale, who was our obstetrician's partner, and she
Mm,
was great. She was like, "Look, do you just want to take her out on Wednesday?" We're like, "Yes, just take her out." We were
mm,
just getting too scared with what if if yeah, if I was getting to danger zone with preeclampsia and going full term, and then I thought,
mm,
oh, I don't want another situation. I don't want an ambulance. I don't want to go to emergency or anything. I just, want to do this as straightforward. So yeah, we just had the
mm,
2 shots of, and they did let us out that day on that Monday, but we went back on the Wednesday and then had her on the Wednesday. But it was bizarre because it was, I think the day that Elle was born were the days that they stopped flying in and out and grounded all the planes. So it was right at that peak. I remember being in the hospital holding this baby, just going, what is happening to the world right now? So it
mm.
was a real interesting time to have a baby, and
Yeah.
hospitals were locked down as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, Amy couldn't come in and see her at all.
Mm.
So yeah, we were just, yeah.
I can.
We had all of that going on at the
Yeah.
same time, but
Yes.
she just got to full term, and she
Yeah.
was 2.7, which to me felt like the biggest baby in the world
Yeah.
compared to
Right.
1.3. But
Yes.
and she is just the most beautiful, loving,
Mm,
um, gorgeous little girl, and she was a
mm.
gorgeous baby. So, and
Yeah.
that's it. Like, it, and even Ben said, we're kind of sad that the world shut down. He was like, I
Mm,
want to show Elle's only like this for a few months.
yeah.
She only has her visible cleft
Mm,
for a few months. He says, I want to show her off. Like, I want the world to see her the
mm,
way she is and the way she was
mm,
born, and, we really grew to love her little cleft. It was
mm.
such a part of her and such a beautiful part of her as well. And there's nothing wrong with your kid and your baby looking different from the ones on the Huggies
No.
ads.
That's right. And for those listening who perhaps don't know what a cleft looks like, what did Elle look like? What was a little bit, I guess, different about her features?
So basically, you all, like in an embryo, always, well, when you're forming a baby, when they're forming, both sides of the face kind of come together and form at the nose and the mouth.
Hmm.
Els, the two sides of her face didn't quite reach
Okay.
so she had a gap between her lips and her palate. So her gums going right back to her mouth was a big gap, like a long river, basically. And then the two sides of the lips just don't meet together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so that you do that first surgery to put the lip back together and the nose back together at 3 months.
Yep.
And then you do the palate between 10 and 12 months.
Hmm.
And then there's just different things along the way. She'll have a bone graft in her mouth when her adult teeth start to come through. They'll probably, you got to wait till the nose properly repairs, properly grows before you do the nose surgery and
Okay.
things like that. So, but
Okay.
it affects the way they eat, affects the way they breathe. You know, their ears as well are affected. So she's had two sets of grommets in already.
Okay.
There's a lot connected, and then when it affects the ears, it affects the speech. So you do speech therapies and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
all connected. But yeah, she's doing well, and we've gone almost. You know, we will go a year before we'll go to the hospital again, which is like, I think we don't have to do the hospital till February, so it's almost a year, which is
Yeah.
amazing. It's the longest time we haven't been
Amazing.
in a hospital for like
Oh,
6 years. So we're kind of, yeah, we're getting through the really difficult kind of period now.
and now it's amazing the work that you're doing as an ambassador to, you mentioned Interplast as well. That's
Mm.
organisation that supports children who have who require cleft surgeries. Could you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I'm really, really kind of proud to be part of Miracle Babies and Interplus because I feel like it's both. I've been an ambassador for Miracle Babies since Immi was born, but it feels quite fitting now. I've just come on board with Interplast, and they do work. They go into developing countries to do surgeries, life-changing surgeries on babies with cleft lips and cleft palates in developing countries that don't have access to these kind of surgeries. Even in Australia, they have a limited number of surgeons who are able and licensed to do cleft surgeries because they just don't want someone who hasn't done this surgery, for 2 years to go on a baby's face and start not hacking away, but they want those skills to be refined.
Yeah.
And we have such access to great surgeons and medical systems in Australia, and it's not the case for developing nations. So they go into developing nations and do those surgeries. They also do. They help a lot of fire victims and burns victims as well for their skin grafts, and just such an
Amazing
incredible work that
work.
what they do. And I'm really proud to be part of that. I'm proud to be part of Miracle Babies as well
Yeah.
because they provide such incredible support to preemie mums because a lot of mums and well preemie parents I should say, like they don't know the world that they're about to step into. They don't know what's happening, and a lot of the time haven't had any time to prepare. So Miracle Babies supports those parents. They provide such great information. Remember the first thing Ben brought back from NICU because I was in ICU was the this book from Miracle Babies, which is basically a glossary of all the medical terms you could hear about over your NICU journey as well. And they provide, and they also they campaign for different changes for women and preemie women, and also, and I'll talk about that in a sec, but also and also fundraise for research and work with hospitals and everything to better support preemie families. So it's kind of fitting my two daughters, being a part of these two organizations, and I can't wait for them to be a little older and know about these organizations, and to also they also will be proud of their difference, which they absolutely are. My eldest said to my husband a couple of weeks ago, she was like, Daddy, if I'm a preemie and Elle's a clefty, what are you? Like, he was like, well, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I think he just said I'm a ranger. Because I got hair.
Yeah.
So, they're growing up proud of their difference. Like Amy had
Yes.
to do a show and tell at kindergarten, and she brought in a picture of her when she was a preemie and told them all about her preemie journey, and and I want Elle, to grow up to be proud of her difference and her cleft. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not
Yes.
something, it might look different to other babies' photos, but it certainly isn't, something to be proud of. She had to be
Yeah.
stronger. She had to be fiercer. She had to be tougher than a lot of babies. And she showed such bravery and strength and courage from a really early age. And that's something that I want her to grow up and be proud of, and be proud of her difference.
Yeah, I love it. Doing such great work with two fantastic organizations. And I'm curious for those parents out there who might be facing a similar outlook as what you faced, or, from a preemie birth potentially to, even a sick newborn or everything in between, right? There's so much that is out of our control. When you look back at your journey, what advice would you give to those parents who might be sitting in it right now?
Mm, good question. I would say be if it's like a cleft journey, I notice a lot of parents, they hide their baby away or they don't take any photos or don't put on any social media until they're 3 months. Like, and I know why they're doing it, but I would just say to them, be proud of your kids' difference, teach them about their journey, tell them how strong and brave they've had to be from a really early age. Immi went through a hard situation just recently at Little Athletics, and I remember just telling her, like, you're a preemie, Immi, you were born strong, you show that strength now. And she was like, yes, okay. And I'll be telling Elle the same as well. I want her to be proud of her difference and Immi to be proud of the challenges that she's had as well. Like, take photos, take as many photos as you can. Like, I took so many photos and videos of Elle's cleft, and I feel like it's not enough. Like, I just want to take more because I don't have it anymore. I can't. I want to remember her. That's who she was, and there's nothing to be ashamed about that. If it doesn't look like it does on a particular baby commercial, then that baby commercial is missing out. There's so much more difference there is than normal in the world, and a difference is a superpower as well. So I would say celebrate your kids' difference, teach them about their journeys. But if you're in the thick of it, just there's nothing you can say except to say you will get to the other side. Like, I know it's really hard, but preemie parents, um, and any parent of a kid with a difference, like, or an extra challenge, you're so much tougher than you have to be. You have to be their advocate. Just know how tough you are, know how strong you're being. And if you're hearing a lot of outside noise to say different, or if people quite don't understand, then just shut that noise off and concentrate on your baby. But just know how strong, the parents with kids who have extra challenges have to be. And that's something that you should be really proud of at the moment. You're doing a
Yeah,
great job. You're really
yeah.
doing a great job.
So well said. It's been an absolute blast having you on, Sam. I feel like I could speak to you for days, but
Yeah,
for
me
those,
too. So easy to talk to, Leonie. So easy.
oh, thank you. No, for those listening, how can they find out more about you?
Um, I always welcome, like, if you're in the middle of a cleft journey at the moment, if you've just got your diagnosis, I know how hard that can be. And I always welcome people to reach out on Instagram, or I'm a bit harder to find on Facebook. You find on Facebook. But yeah, on Instagram, I'm always on Instagram. Like, send me a message there or send me a message through Sportet. But yeah, I always welcome, yeah, if you're going through a, because preemie parents and other cleft parents, they got me through, those difficult journeys. And I think that's why I chose to be, you know, outward on social media, because I wanted to be, I am proud of my daughters, and, I wanted to show them off. And also I struggled to find myself in anyone else when I really needed to find myself in someone else's story somehow to tell me it's going to be okay. So I think after I had the girls, I was like, well, I want other parents to see this, and I want them to see themselves in me and know that it's going to be okay. And your cleft journey or your preemie journey is going to be okay as well. So I think that's why I have the girls on social media because I'm super proud of them, but also I want other parents to be able to find themselves and know that they're not alone. Because especially with cleft journeys, it was hard to find that many cleft parents because a lot of them hide their kids away. I don't understand it, but
Yeah.
well, I do. I want the world. I always say as well, like, I don't want those parents to change, but I want the world to be able to change for those parents, because it's the world that's made them feel like they can't show their baby until they're 3 months and had that first surgery. And if the world could just see difference in the most beautiful light that it should be seen in, then yeah, it would be a much better place. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just I didn't want them to feel lonely. I wanted them to find themselves in our story somewhere. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
love that. I'll pop your details in the episode notes as well, your Instagram handle, so people can find you. Thank you so much again,
wonderful.
Sam.
Thanks, Leonie.